Greetings. I'm going to be reading from 3 books in this video. The first one is this one, Josephus. The second one is this one, the Discourses of Brigham. And the third one is this one, Parson'S textbook. Here's the man, Flavius Josephus. The life of Flavius Josephus. The family from which I am derived is not an ignoble one, but hath descended all along from the priests. And as nobility among several people is of a different origin, so with us to be of the sacerdotal dignity is an indication of the splendor of a family. Now I am not only sprung from a sacerdotal family in general, but from the first of the 24 courses, and as among us there is not only a considerable difference between one family of each course and another, I am of the chief family of that first course also. Nay, further, but by my mother I am of the royal blood, for the children of Asmoneus, from whom that family was derived, had both the office of the high priesthood and the dignity of a king for a long time together. I will accordingly set down my progenitors in order. My grandfather's father was named Simon, with the addition of Psellus. That's Psellus. He lived at the same time with that son of Simon, the high priest, who first of all, the high priest, was named Hyrcanus. This Simon Psellus had 9 sons, one of whom was Matthias, called Ephlius. He married the daughter of Jonathan, the high priest, which Jonathan was the first of the sons of Asmoneus, who was high priest, and was a brother of Simon the high priest also. This Matthias had a son called Matthias Curtis, and that in the first year of the government of Hyrcanus. His son's name was Joseph, born in the 9th year of the reign of Alexandra. His son Matthias was born in the 10th year of the reign of Archelaus. As I was born to Matthias in the 2nd and the 1st year of the reign of Caius Caesar. I have 3 sons. Hyrcanus, the eldest, was born in the 4th year of the reign of Vespasian, as was Justus, born in the 7th, and Agrippa in the 9th. Thus have I set down the genealogy of my family, as I have found it described in the public records, and so bid adieu to those who calumniate me as of a lower original. Now, my father Matthias was not only eminent on account of his nobility, but had a higher commendation on account of his righteousness, and was in great reputation in Jerusalem, the greatest city we have. I was myself brought up with my brother, whose name was Matthias, for he was my own brother, by both father and mother, and I made mighty proficiency in the improvements of my learning, and appeared to have both a great memory and understanding. Moreover, when I was a child, and about 14 years of age, I was commended by all for the love I had to learning, on which account the high priests and principal men of the city came then frequently to me together, in order to know my opinion about the accurate understanding of points of the law. And when I was about 16 years old, I had a mind to make trial of the several sects that were among us. These sects are three. The first is that of the Pharisees, the second, that of the Sadducees, and the third, that of the Essenes, as we have frequently told you. For I thought that by this means I might choose the best, if I were once acquainted with them all. So I contented myself with hard fare, and underwent great difficulties, and went through them all. Nor did I content myself with these trials only, but when I was informed that one whose name was Bonus lived in the desert, and used no other clothing than grew upon trees, and had no other food than what grew of its own accord, and bathed himself in cold water frequently, both night and day, in order to preserve his chastity, I imitated him in those things, and continued with him 3 years. So when I had accomplished my desires, I returned back to the city, into being now 19 years old, and began to conduct myself according to the rules of the sect of the Pharisees, which is of kin to the sect of the Stoics, as the Greeks call them. But when I was in the 26th year of my age, it happened that I took a voyage to Rome, and this on the occasion which I shall now describe. At the time when Felix was procurator of Judea, there were certain priests of my acquaintance, and very excellent persons they were, whom on a small and trifling occasion had put into bonds and sent to Rome to plead their cause before Caesar. These I was desirous to procure deliverance for, and that especially because I was informed that they were not unmindful of piety towards God, even under their afflictions, but supported themselves with figs and nuts. Accordingly, I came to Rome, though it were through a great number of hazards by sea, for as our ship was drowned in the Adriatic Sea, we that were in it, being about 600 in number, swam for our lives all the night, when upon the first appearance of the day, and upon our sight of a ship of Cyrene, I and some others, 80 in all, by God's providence, prevented the rest, and were taken up into the other ship. And when I had thus escaped, and was come to Dicearchia, which the Italians call Puteoli, I became acquainted with a Liturius, an actor of plays, and much beloved by Nero, but a Jew by birth, and through his interest became known to Poppaea, Caesar's wife, and took care, as soon as possible, to entreat her to procure that the priests might be set at liberty. And when, besides this favor, I had obtained many presents from Poppaea, I returned home again. And now I perceived innovations were already begun, and that there were a great many very much elevated in hopes of a revolt from the Romans. I therefore endeavored to put a stop to these tumultuous persons, and persuaded them to change their minds, and laid before their eyes against whom it was that they were going to fight, and told them that they were inferior to the Romans, not only in martial skill, but also in good fortune, and desired them not rashly, and after the most foolish manner, to bring on the dangers of the most terrible mischiefs upon their country, upon their families, and upon themselves. And this I said with vehement exhortation, because I foresaw that the end of such a war would be most unfortunate to us. But I could not persuade them, for the madness of desperate men was quite too hard for me. I was then afraid lest, by inculcating these things so often, I should incur their hatred and their suspicions, as if I were of our enemies' party, and should run to the danger of being seized by them and slain, since they were already possessed of Antonia, which was the citadel. So I retired into the inner court of the temple. Yet did I go out of the temple again after Menahem and the principal of the band of robbers were put to death. When I abode among the high priests and the chief of the Pharisees, but no small fear seized upon us when we saw the people in arms, while we ourselves knew not what we should do, and were not able to restrain the seditious. However, as the danger was directly upon us, we pretended that we were of the same opinion with them, but only advised them to be quiet for the present, and to let the enemy go away, still hoping that Gessius, in brackets it says Florus, would not be long ere he came, and that with great forces, and so put an end to these seditious proceedings. But upon his coming and fighting, he was beaten, and a great many of those that were with him fell. And this disgrace which Decius, in brackets says with Cestius, received, because became the calamity of our whole nation. For those that were fond of the war were so far elevated with its success that they had hopes of finally conquering the Romans. Of which war another occasion was ministered, which was this: those that dwelt in the neighboring cities of Syria seized upon such Jews as dwelt among them with their wives and children, and slew them, when they had not the least occasion of complaint against them. For they did neither attempt any innovation or revolt from the Romans, nor had they given any marks of hatred or treacherous designs toward the Syrians. But what was done by the inhabitants of Scythopolis was the most impious and the most highly criminal of all. For when the Jews, their enemies, came upon them from without, they forced the Jews that were among them to bear arms against their own countrymen, which is unlawful for us to do. And when, by their assistance, they had joined battle with those who attacked them, and had beaten them, after that victory they forgot the assurances they had given these their fellow citizens and confederates, and slew them all, being in number many 10,000s. In brackets, it says 13,000. The like miseries were undergone by those Jews that were the inhabitants of Damascus. But we have given a more accurate account of these things in the books of the Jewish war. I only mention them now because I would demonstrate to my readers that the Jews' war with the Romans was not voluntary, but that for the main they were forced by necessity to enter into it. necessity to enter into it. So when Gesius had been beaten, as we have said already, the principal men of Jerusalem, seeing that the robbers and innovators had arms in great plenty, and fearing lest they, while they were unprovided with arms, should be in subjection to their enemies, which also came to be the case afterward, and being informed that all Galilee had not yet revolted from the Romans, but that some part of it was still quiet, they sent me and two others of the priests, who were men of excellent characters, Joazar and Judas, in order to persuade the ill men there to lay down their arms and teach them this lesson, that it were better to have those arms reserved for the most courageous men that the nation had, in brackets it says, than to be kept there. For that it had been resolved that those our best men should always have their arms ready against futurity, but still so that they should wait to see what the Romans would do. When I had therefore received these instructions, I came into Galilee and found the people of Sepphoris, in no small agony about their country, by reason that the Galileans had resolved to plunder it, on account of the friendship they had with the Romans, and because they had given their right hand and made a league with Cestius Gallus, the president of Syria. But I delivered them all out of the fear they were in, and persuaded the multitude to deal kindly with them, and permitted them to send to those that were their own hostages with Gesius to Dora, which is a city of Phoenicia, as often as they pleased, though I still found the inhabitants of Tiberias ready to take arms, and that on the occasion following. There were three factions in this city. The first was composed of men of worth and gravity. Of these, Julius Capellus was the head. Now he, as well as all his companions, Herod the son of Maerus, and Herod the son of Gamaliel, and Compsus the son of Compsus. For as to Compsus, his brother Crispus, who had once been governor of the city under the great king, in brackets it says Agrippa, he was beyond Jordan in his own possessions. All these persons before named gave their advice that the city should then continue in their allegiance to the Romans and to the king. But Pistus, who was guided by his son Justus, did not acquiesce in that resolution. Otherwise, he was himself naturally of a good and virtuous character. But the second faction was composed of the most ignoble persons, and was determined for war. But as for Justus, the son of Pistus, who was the head of the third faction, although he pretended to be doubtful about going to war, yet was he really desirous of innovation, as supposing that he should gain power to himself by the change of affairs. He therefore came into the midst of them, and endeavored to inform the multitude that the city Tiberias had ever been a city of Galilee, and that in the days of Herod the Tetrarch, who had built it, it had obtained the principal place, and that he had ordered that the city Sepphoris should be subordinate to the city Tiberias, and that they had not lost this preeminence even under Agrippa the father, but had retained it under Felix until Felix was procurator of Judea. But he told them that now they had been so unfortunate as to be made a present by Nero to Agrippa, Jr., and that upon Sepphoris' submission of itself to the Romans, that was to become the capital city of Galilee, and that the royal treasury and the archives were now removed from them. When he had spoken these things, and a great many more, against King Agrippa, in order to provoke the people to revolt, he added that this was the time for them to take arms and join with the Galileans as their confederates, whom they might command, and who would now willingly assist them out of the hatred they bear to the people of Sepphoris, because they preserved their fidelity to the Romans, and to gather a great number of forces in order to punish them. As he said this, he exhorted the multitude to go to war, in brackets it says, to go to war, for his abilities lay in making harangues to the people, and to be too hard in his speeches for such as opposed him, though they advised what was more to their advantage, and this by his craftiness and his fallacies, for he was not unskilful in the learning of the Greeks, and dependence on that skill it was that he undertook to write a history of these affairs, as aiming by this way of haranguing to disguise the truth. But as to this man, how ill were his character and conduct of life, and how he and his brother were in great measure the authors of our destruction. I shall give the reader an account in the progress of my narration. So when Justus had, by his persuasions, prevailed with the citizens of Tiberias to take arms, nay, and had forced a great many so to do against their wills, he went out and set the villages that belonged to Gadara and Hippos on fire, which villages were situated on the borders of Tiberias and of the region of Scythopolis. And this was the state Tiberias was now in. But as for Gishala, its affairs were thus. When John, the son of Levi, saw some of the citizens much elevated upon a revolt from the Romans, he labored to restrain them, and entreated them that they would keep their allegiance to them. But he could not gain his purpose, although he did his endeavors to the utmost. For the neighboring people in Gadara, Gabara, and Sargana, with the Tyrians, got together a great army, and fell upon Gishala, and took Gishala by force, and set it on fire. And when they had entirely demolished it, they returned home. Upon which John was so enraged that he armed all his men, and joined battle with the people aforementioned, and rebuilt Gishala after a manner better than before, and fortified it with walls for its future security. But Gamala persevered in its allegiance to the Romans, for the reason following. Philip, the son of Joachim, who was their governor under King Agrippa, had been unexpectedly preserved when the royal palace at Jerusalem had been besieged, but as he fled away, had fallen into another danger, and that was of being killed by Manahem and the robbers that were with him. But certain Babylonians who were of his kindred and were then in Jerusalem hindered the robbers from executing their design. So Philip stayed there 4 days and fled away on the fifth, having disguised himself with fictitious hair, they might not be discovered. And when he was come to one of the villages to him belonging, but one that was situated at the borders of the citadel of Gamala, he said to some of those that were under him, and he commanded them to come to him. But God hindered his intention, and this for his own advantage also. But God hindered his intention, and if this for his own advantage also. For had it not so happened, he had certainly perished. For a fever having seized upon him immediately, he wrote to Agrippa and Bernice, and gave them to one of his freedmen to carry them to Varus, who at this time was procurator of the kingdom, which the king and his sister had entrusted him withal, while they were gone to Berytus, with an intention of meeting Decius. When Varus had received these letters to Philip, and learned that he was preserved, he was very uneasy at it, and supposing that he should appear useless to the king and his sister. Now Philip was come. He therefore produced the carrier of the letters before the multitude, and accused him of forging the same, and said that he spake falsely when he related that Philip was at Jerusalem, fighting amongst the Jews against the Romans. So he slew him. And when this freedman of Philip did not return again, Philip was doubtful what should be the occasion of his stay, and sent a second messenger with letters, that he might, upon his return, inform him what had befallen the other that had been sent before, and why he tarried so long. Varus accused this messenger of also, when he came, of telling a falsehood, and slew him, for he was puffed up and by the Syrians that were at Caesarea, and had great expectations, for they said that Agrippa would be slain by the Romans for the crimes which the Jews had committed, and that he should himself take the government as derived from their kings. For Varus was, by the confession of all, of the royal family, as being a descendant of Sohemus, who had enjoyed a tetrarchy about Libanus, for which reason it was that he was puffed up and kept the letters to himself. He contrived also that the king should not meet with those writings, but guarding all the passes, lest anyone should escape and inform the king what had been done. He moreover slew many of the Jews in order to gratify the Syrians of Caesarea. He had a mind also to join with the Trachonites in Batanea, and to take up arms and make an assault upon the Babylonian Jews that were at Ecbatana, for that was the name they went by. He therefore called to him 12 of the Jews of Caesarea, of the best character, and ordered them to go to Ecbatana and inform their countrymen who dwelt there that Varus had heard that you intend to march against the king, but not believing that report, he has sent us to persuade you to lay down your arms, and that this compliance will be a sign that he did well not to give credit to those that raised the report concerning you. He also enjoined them to send 70 of their principal men to make a defense for them as to the accusation laid against them. So when the 12 messengers came to their countrymen at Ecbatana, and found that they had no designs of innovation at all, they persuaded them to send the 70 men also, who, not at all suspecting what would come, sent them accordingly. So these 70 went down to Caesarea together with the 12 ambassadors, where Varus met them with the king's forces, and slew them all together with the 12 ambassadors, brackets 12 ambassadors, and made an expedition against the Jews of Ecbatana. But one there was of the 70 who escaped, and made haste to inform the Jews of their coming. Upon which they took their arms, with their wives and children, and retired to the citadel at Gamala, leaving their own villages full of all sorts of good things, and having put many 10,000s of cattle therein. When Philip was informed of these things, he also came to the citadel of Gamala, and when he was come, the multitude cried aloud, and desired him to resume the government, and to make an expedition against Varus and the Syrians of Caesarea. For it was reported that they had slain the king. But Philip restrained their zeal, and put them in mind of the benefits that the king bestowed upon them, and told them how powerful the Romans were, and said it was not for their advantage to make war with them. And at length he prevailed with them. But now, when the king was acquainted with Varus's design, which was to cut off the Jews of Caesarea, being many 10,000s, with their wives and children, and all in one day, he called to him Equiculus Modius, and set him to be Varus's successor, as we have elsewhere related. But still Philip kept possession of the citadel of Gamala, and of the country adjoining to it, which thereby continued in their allegiance to the Romans. This from the Discourses of Brigham Young. The Lord does not establish, this chapter is called Free Agency. The Lord has not established laws by which I am compelled to have my shoes made in a certain style. He has never given a law to determine whether I shall have a square-toed boot or a peak-toed boot, or what boot, whether I shall have a coat with the waist just under my arms and the skirts down to my heels, or whether I shall have a coat like the one I have on. Intelligence, to a certain extent, was bestowed both upon saint and sinner to use independently, aside from whether they have the law of the priesthood or not, or whether they have ever heard of it or not. Journal and Discourses, Volume 2, page 139. Take the history of this church from the commencement, and we have proved that we cannot receive all the Lord has for us. We have proved to the heavens and to one another that we are not yet capacitated to receive all the Lord has for us, and that we have not yet a disposition to receive all He has for us. Can you understand that there is a time you can receive, and there is a time that you cannot receive? A time when there is no place in the heart to receive. The heart of man will be closed up. The will be set against this and that we have opportunity to receive. There is an abundance the Lord has for the people, if they would receive it. Journal of Discourses, Volume 10, page 291. And finally, from this book, Parson'S textbook. Starting at page 32. Again, he says, this from Ancient America. In this part of Mexico, Captain Dupuy examined a peculiar ruin, of which he gave the following account. Near the road from the village of Tlamanalco to that called Mecamecan, about 3 miles east of the latter, there is an isolated granite rock which was artificially formed into a kind of pyramid with 6 hewn steps facing the east. The summit of the structure is a platform or horizontal plane, well adapted to observation of the stars on every side of the hemisphere. It is almost demonstrable that this very ancient monument was exclusively devoted to astronomical observations. For on the south side of the rock are sculptured several hieroglyphical figures having a relation to astronomy. The most striking figure in the group is that of a man in profile, standing erect and directing his view to the rising stars in the sky. He holds to his eye a tube or optical instrument. Below his feet is a frieze divided into 6 compartments, with as many celestial signs carved on its surface. It has been already stated that finely wrought telescopic tubes have been found among remains of the mound builders. They were used, it seems, by the ancient people of Mexico and Central America, and they were known also in ancient Peru, where a silver figure of a man in the act of using such a tube has been discovered in one of the old tombs. Ancient America, page 122 and 123. Again, they had an accurate measure of the solar year and a system of chronology. Ibid, page 187. Josiah quotes Atwater. I am convinced from an attention to many hundreds of these works in every part of the West which I have visited, that their authors had a knowledge of astronomy. American Antiquities, page 265, edition of 1833. De La Field says, I have also recognized in your memoir on the division of time among the Mexican nations, compared with those of Asia, some very striking analogies between the Toltec characters and institutions observed on the banks of the Nile. Among these analogies, there is one which is worthy of attention. It is the use of the vague year of 365 days, composed of equal months, and of 5 complementary days, equally employed at Thebes and Mexico, a distance of 3,000 leagues, 9,000 miles. The use of a year of 365 days and a quarter is a proof that it was either borrowed from the Egyptians or that they had a common origin. American Antiquities, page 52-53. Again, from the earliest ages we find skill and knowledge in astronomy, and the more we examine, the more we are surprised at the extent of astronomical science in the earliest history of the world. Ibid, page 48. Aborigines of America, metalworkers. Nadaliak says, excavations near Davenport, Iowa, the objects placed with the dead consisted of a large seashell, 2 unused copper axes. Prehistoric America, page 113. Josiah Priest says, a Mr. Thomas Lee discovered not long since on his farm in Tompkinson County in the state of New York the entire iron works of a wagon reduced to rust. From this discovery, much might be conjectured respecting the state of cultivation, as a wagon denotes not only knowledge of mechanic arts, equal perhaps in that respect with the present times, but also that roads existed where a wagon could not have traversed the country. American Antiquities, page 254, edition of 1834. Morse says, in clearing out a spring near some ancient ruins of the West, on the bank of the Little Miami, not far its entrance into the Ohio, was found a copper coin, 4 feet below the surface of the earth, from the facsimile of which it appears that the characters on the coin are old Persian characters. Morse's Universal Geography, Volume 1, page 442, Ibid, 174. Okay. God loves you, God bless you, and I love you. Have a blessed day.